There's no music if you have no body to play it with, so take care of your body first.
You getting into the gym and you lifting weights and working on muscles it's physical therapy for the benefit of your playing.
The truth is, nothing works like just taking care of the simple stuff. Diet, exercise, and sleep. Take care of that and you'll be fine.
Join us as two musicians and fitness coaches discuss strength, wellness, and fitness in relation to musicians, artists, and performance.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Tuned and Strong podcast. This lovely lady over here is Angela McHouston of Music Strong.
And this is Dr. Jen Cabas-May of Tuned and Tone Performance. And we're joined today by a very special guest, Dr. Simone Mauer. Did I say your name correctly?
Yes, it was Simone Maurer is how we would pronounce it, I guess, in Australia.
And you're in Australia. What part of Australia are you in?
Yeah, I'm currently based in Melbourne.
Right. And so can you tell everybody who's listening a little bit about who you are? I mean, I met you at the NFA conference in Utah a few years ago, and you had just left New York, I think, and were on your way back to Australia. So, I mean, that was a really perfect hop, skip, and a jump for you, like on your way back.
It was indeed. Yes, that was, I think, the 2019 conference. Wow. Yes, it was, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. So, yes, I'm a flute player, which makes sense why we met at a flute convention. So my training was in classical flute playing. Actually, I sort of originally took the orchestral flute playing route, sort of did that in my undergraduate degree back here in Australia. And then I did an honours as part of my undergrad and became quite interested in music research and particularly music performance and research and how that even worked. So that led me to then study overseas. I went to the University of Cambridge in England and I did my master's and MPhil in music studies and specialised in music performance, but I was working within the music performances research department. And my research there was quite different to what I'm doing now, but I was really interested in language and accent and flute playing and how that influences flute sound, which is, there's already a substantial amount of research on that. But it was when I was at Cambridge that one of my classmates, and within this music performance research world, I discovered that some researchers were looking at body and movement in all sorts of music performance, and I became curious about that. I wanted to know more as to, what is the role of the body? Sometimes I guess I had come from quite a traditional background of thinking of music as quite a cognitive exercise, and that music theory and this really strict classical training, and I hadn't really considered the body and my body either. I'd had a couple of injuries that had been quite bad, but I thought, but music, I didn't really see myself like an athlete. I knew that people were talking about musicians needing to look after their bodies, but I still wasn't really embodying that myself and taking it on board. Anyway, I spent another year in the UK teaching and such, and then moved back to Australia and moved to Melbourne, where the University of Melbourne is Australia's biggest, or maybe not the biggest university, but it's very high ranking, has a really great music department. And as I found out, their music psychology department is very well known internationally, particularly for one researcher who is my now PhD supervisor, Professor Jane Davidson. So she's one of the pioneering music psychologists to look at embodiment and embodied cognition of musicians. So acknowledging that music making, and actually all sorts of music engagement isn't just cognitive, and there's a huge bodily aspect to it, and an embodiment to thinking and understanding and that cognitive aspect of music. So anyway, I quickly fell into a PhD in music performance, and then that grew into music performance and psychology as well. So I was exploring solo flute music that also had composer instructed choreography or stage movements or just body aspects to it, to either manipulate the sound or staging to help tell this story. The different types of movement and things. Composers like Karlheinz Stockhausen, Oliver Nussen has a great piece for solo flute, Masks, which has staging and things like that. There are a few other pieces I can list off or provide later if people are interested.
All I know is George Crumb's Voice of the Whale. That was my favorite. I thought that was just the coolest thing, for 3 masked players under a blue light. Like, oh, I have to play this. I just thought it was so cool. That's the only one I know of.
It is so cool. Because it really it brings things a lot. There's so much to consider when we, I think, acknowledge and embrace this idea of body and not just sort of hiding on stage, but really stepping into that and curious to see what composers can do with that, and of course musicians as well. It's breaking away from perhaps an old ideology of composer's intention and the musician just being this vessel through which music, but actually acknowledging that the musician themselves and their body and how that whole aspect contributes to a performance. And music psychology research reflects that. We know visual bias is huge in audiences, understanding, perceiving, evaluating, judging a performance as well. So then I thought, okay, I really want to understand this for my own artistic development. I'm curious to know what's going on. And I thought, well, flute players are really interesting. We've got this asymmetrical instrument. Well, we hold it asymmetrically. What an interesting thing to navigate. But also, we often talk about the flute being very related to the voice, and singers have amazing movement training as part of their. I just feel like that's never questioned. Whereas with instrumentalists, I thought, ooh, yeah, why don't we have those same movement training as the opera? As I saw my opera friends doing at university level, I thought, I think I could benefit, from knowing my body more, feeling really comfortable and confident, and also a huge musician health implication, which Angela, that's your whole life, and I really respect what you do there, because as someone who's had to get myself through injury, or I have hypermobility and constantly dealing with that, I'm so grateful that I've had such serious movement training myself and can look after myself as a professional musician and someone who has a lot of bendy joints and things like that. So anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track, but as part of my PhD, the music psychology side, I wanted to look at flute players and actually analyze their movements and just start to understand that. So my supervisor, Professor Jane Davidson, she said, oh, I've been using this movement analysis framework with another researcher, Dr. Mary Broughton from the University of Queensland up north in Australia, and they were looking at marimba players and the embodiment of that. And they said, oh, we use something that's called Laban movement analysis. I said, what's that? Anyway, so I started reading up on it, and I came to realize this person, Laban, Rudolph Von Barban. He was an Austro-Hungarian dancer, dance educator, and really dance theorist. Which is the big thing, looking at movement analysis. So he created this framework. Well, not just him. I'd really like to mention here that there were a lot of people, including a lot of invisible women who worked for him and with him, and students and ideas that were, that he picked up from other people. But if we can say, when I say Laban's work, I'm acknowledging a lot of people, visible and invisible, who contributed to that. But he created this framework, which is still being developed, and there was a lot developed after he passed. And Laban movement analysis, I define it and explain it as a theoretical and experiential framework used to describe, analyze, and interpret human movement analysis. And Laban also created a notation system for this as well, and he did this so that movement could be recorded. There were already, different ways of annotating and recording dance choreography, but he created his own system. Funnily enough, it borrows very heavily from music notation, so I was able to pick it up very quickly. But it's a really cool notation system, and the fact that you can watch someone record it down, then once it's in this written format, it can be studied and analysed and put back together and synthesised and really interrogated. So he was trying to move dance and movement from just this creative art form into quite a scholarly discipline in a way, which I find really interesting. So I wanted to know more about it, and long story short, I got a scholarship to move to New York for 1 year and study at the Laban Bartenieff Institute of Movement Studies in New York. It's in Brooklyn there. So they have a 9-month certification in Laban movement analysis program. So that was a big change. I actually hadn't been to America before, but I thought, why not move to New York? Keep it casual first time round. And
keep it casual.
Yeah. But it was a life-changing year to be over there, actually, and through that movement training, the Laban aspect, and his student Irmgard Bartenieff, and her work as well, which is sort of more in the physical therapy, rehabilitation side of it. But the year of study there was so important for this scholarly aspect to really apply into my PhD and analysing the way that flute players move, but also artistically, that creative element, and then just personally as well. Like I said, gaining a lot of confidence through self-knowledge and realising that my body holds a lot of knowledge as well. If I can tap into it, and I actually know what I need to recuperate, and by learning some common developmental patterns from Bartenieff's fundamentals, I could create an informed and a structured but very personalised sort of movement program for myself, which I've really been embodying since and really enjoying. So then that was, when did I start that? October 2018. So I did the year and there, and then of course applied to present at the National Flute Association convention, which is where I met Angela, and that's sort of where that story intersects.
How serendipitous. I had never heard of what you were talking about, and I was like, oh, another movement body person, I have to meet her. There weren't so many.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that was a fascinating thing. Like, America's flute scene, I was so impressed by it. Australia has a really lovely, warm flute community, but it's nowhere near the size and the intensity that the NFA convention was. I was blown away.
And that was a small convention. There was not a large attendance to that
That's
one.
so hard for me to understand.
Well, it was Utah. I mean, a lot of people didn't care to go to Utah, and it was far out and it wasn't close, and they're like, So, I mean, if you've gone to one in Orlando, or they did one in San Francisco, or this year's going to be in Chicago, it's going to be, I think there's 6,000 members. It's something insane. There's too many flute players in the world.
That's I love that though. Yeah, amazing. And I had joined a session with another movement person as well. We had shared a session in terms of presenting. So it is an established field. Whether you want to think of it as movement or health well-being, I like to refer to it often as a somatic practice. And somatic meaning just of the body. So yoga, that's a somatic practice. Alexander technique, that's a somatic practice, as is Feldenkrais. Laban movement analysis is somatic, as is Bartenieff fundamentals, like anything to do with the body, and that leads into sort of body-mind connection and body mapping and all those things, which I think are just fantastic. I think we do talk about, well, we're all sort of referring to the same things, we just have different ways of talking about them. The language is different, and I think that's a strength. I like that there are so many different avenues in, so people can find really what works for them. And I like the Laban world and the Bartenieff world as well. The Laban framework really gave me a language and a way of taking a whole thing, breaking it down into little parts, being able to focus on them individually, but then synthesizing it back to the whole again. And the Bartenieff fundamentals were really helpful to me because of their recuperative nature, their body conditioning aspect of it, and that they're quite dynamic in a way. And I've heard from people who studied with Irmgard Bartenieff herself that she was quite a dynamic teacher, and in her sort of movement classes she would like to start standing up, and people would, that there would be a lot of focus on moving and how do we support not just a static posture, but how can you support yourself functionally and expressively while moving. And I really love that aspect of her fundamentals and her principles as well, that movement doesn't just have to be functional, but we can add in these expressive elements. Although I think it's hard to say that there's, even if you're moving in a very controlled way, that's still expressing something itself, I think. But this very dynamic, expressive, enlivening sort of movement, I find recuperative in a way, and very just lovely to have in as a person as well as artistically. So should I explain a little bit, get into some details? I know I've talked very vaguely. I can explain a bit of the Laban framework and how that fits in with Bartenieff's work.
That's what I was going to say, because I was jotting down questions like, what does this look like? And like, how do you use it? What are some examples? And I think if you just want to go into that, that would explain all of my questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And please feel free to ask along the way. So I'll start with Laban's framework of how do we analyze movement? How do we start breaking that down? So Laban categorized human movement with four main categories, and they are body, which is the what body part or body combination is moving, and then space, where is that body or bodies moving? How can we refer to space? Then the category of effort. Effort is a bit of a loaded word in English. I think effort, we can, you have to put in, I have to work hard. But effort in the Laban framework, linguistically, it came from the time of the World Wars, and the war effort was actually seen as quite a positive thing, or wanting to contribute to. But effort in this framework, you can think of it as the quality of movement, and it goes into a further breakdown there. But I'll move on to the last category, and that's shape. Now, Laban himself didn't separate shape out. That was done by one of his students, Warren Lamb. But shape is to do with the relationship between the mover and themselves, or the mover and their environment. So of these four categories, we have what body part is moving where in space, with what quality, how, and in what relationship to those, that body, space, effort, and shape. So yeah, those ways of breaking it down. Each category has its own terminology, its own notational system. In the body category, we can talk about body parts, body actions, initiations and sequencing. Where does the movement start and how does it flow through the body? Sometimes body can be considered more of that functional category of going back to initiation and sequencing. If you're seeing someone walking and maybe they're having some lower back pain or they're a bit uncomfortable or something, like you might look at, okay, when they're walking, where do they initiate from? Maybe they're initiating really from their knees when they're starting to walk, or maybe they don't have that follow through of the whole pelvis helping them, or maybe their chin and their neck is leading them. So looking really at what is moving, where, what's initiating the movement, and how does that flow and sequence through. And that category really works quite well with Irmgard Bartenieff, who was one of Laban's students. And so she was really interested in in that functional side, but as I said before, also expressive movement. And she was, I guess, herself, her bugbear was people's sort of pelvic area and this lower torso, upper hip area, which I think she is often kind of a dead area of people's, and especially if you're an office worker who sits a lot, or a musician who has to sit a lot in an orchestra or a musical theatre pit. So she was really yes, story of my life. So she was really interested in body connectivity, as that upper lower and all that sort of stuff. So she had 9 guiding principles related to breath support, core support, getting into dynamic alignment. I won't go into those details, but she also had 6 basic exercises that really worked on connecting through that sort of dead middle section of the body, and how to condition it to really work and have that full body connectivity and expressiveness as well. So the movement, she calls them the basic 6 exercises. A lot of them are sort of lying down and related to the pelvic area. It moves from some thigh lifts connecting through the psoas and all of those really important muscles down there, really feeling them, and some very small, it's nothing like having to do 20 sit-ups, and all those sorts of things. But it is a real sort of condition, like getting into your body, feeling those connections, connecting with the breath. I'm sure many people are thinking, that's just like what I do in Pilates or something. Yes, absolutely. Connection to breath is super important in terms of getting inside the body. So Bartenieff was really into helping people connect back into their bodies for efficient functional movement, but also to allow them to express themselves through their movement in the ways that they want to, like widening that functional and expressive movement pattern. And I think that's quite related to what we do in music as well. As flute players, we don't just want to practice to play a piece. We learn to have a full range of tone, colours and articulation options, and then we apply them into pieces and where we need them. It's the same thing with Bartenieff's principles and her basic 6 exercises. It's a general body conditioning and expressiveness that you can apply parts of where you need to. So through Bartenieff's body condition, what we had to do in this 9-month certification course, I became really aware, particularly of my heel to sits bones connection. So even now, years later, when I'm walking upstairs, I think of that. Where am I initiating from? How is my body sequencing through? So I don't overuse my surface level front facing muscles, but I'm really thinking of that lower behind sits bones to heal connection and that dynamic alignment through my legs to help propel me walking upstairs. So yeah, and I can apply different expressive quality effort factors from Laban's effort quality category of movement to help enliven that in this quite expressive way. So yeah, that's one particular area that I really benefited from, and even getting up and down from chairs, that heel to sits bone connection, and a lot of also rotation. We know as flute players. Oh, Angela, I feel you would know so much. Flute players and shoulders, and
shoulder pain and neck pain, and then it's because we go that way.
Yes, and so I
then doesn't have to deal with that, thankfully.
Yeah, I'm just fighting gravity straight up.
That's a different sort of shoulder pain. Yeah.
Before we go too far into that, you hit on something. I mean, as you're explaining this, it's starting to make so much sense, and it sounds so much like what Jen is dealing with a lot with the whole dynamic integration and Feldenkrais and the Alexander technique. You know, and I've had some of that. And these all work so well together. And as you're explaining this, it's like, oh, yeah, musicians need this, because if you're not aware of your pelvis, as Ava used to say, do you feel your feet? If you don't feel your feet, you can't play well, because we're all stuck up in here. And with what I do, if you're all paying attention to here, and you know, your fingers and your embouchure and your emotions, and you forget about the space behind your knees and the inside of your big toe and the outside of the fact that you have the rest of your body. Not only are you possibly shutting off your possible expression, you can also create an injury because you're holding excess tension, or you're just not aware until pain smacks you in the face and makes you wake up.
So true. Yes, absolutely. I love what you're talking there, Angela, as well about space and environment and your body in space. This was another big sort of light bulb moment for me from the Laban framework and some of Bartenieff's, but from that body category going into like what is moving and where. And Laban, he had training as an architect, actually. So this idea of body architecture and space, he had a really interesting way of conceptualizing that, and he made a lot of drawings. He was obviously really great at sketching. There's an archive of a lot of his work at Surrey University in the UK, and when I was in New York over I think our spring break or whatever, I took a trip to the UK and went to the Surrey archives and looked at his drawings. They're fabulous. Well, I mean, maybe they're fabulous in that they convey a lot about dynamic movement in space. So Laban was really interested in three-dimensional geography, especially this idea of sacred geography. So the Platonic solids, in particular, I use a lot in my own work the reference to an icosahedron, which is a perfectly symmetrical 12-sided or sort of 12-cornered three-dimensional shape. Yeah, or you could think of it as a volume, and that's really connected to the 3 dimensions of space. So if you imagine you were putting your arms and your legs open, standing like a star, or as if you were in a door frame, you have high right, high left, low right, low left. They're 4 corners. Then imagine the horizontal plane around you. You can reach sort of forward. To the right, forward to the left. You can reach back to the right, back to the left. There are another 4 corners. And then the final dimension or plane, we'll say sagittal plane, reaching forward and up, down, back high, and down to the front as well. Another 4. So that's where you get your 12 corners actually map really well onto where the human body anatomically can reach. So you can imagine yourself. And Laban did. He imagined humans moving within, the human body works really well within this icosahedron, imagining you're standing in a really inside a three-dimensional icosahedron, and you can just where the limits of your joints naturally move, work with those corners of an icosahedron. So then he had these 12 points and could notate those 12 points. Perhaps you're getting a bit of a music 12 notes of the chromatic scale vibe here. Yes, huge mapping on. That's no coincidence at all. That's sort of just an essential part of it. But now he has these 12 spatial points to refer to. We know, just like with music, you can have heaps of there's an endless amount of sort of pitch and microtones and things between our 12 notes, but and same with the space. But it's good to have 12 things to hold on to so that we can generally talk about where a body part is moving through or between, and from that I'm able to conceptualize people's movement in quite a structured way. And I use this in my flute teaching as well. Maybe not as hardcore as the icosahedron, but when I'm looking and helping flute players, younger flute players, maybe sort of in their high school and early university level, this is where the embodied cognition comes back to. When I often observe flute players learning a piece, or they're in a technical jam and they're going over, I look at what their movement pattern is, and that can help me understand how they're conceptualizing it. But also I think it happens the other way. I'm working one of my main flute student at the moment, early university level. We have a lot of success with helping a lot of technical runs when that student is stuck in this kind of beating, or that flute movement where you kind of get a bit up and down, up and down, or winding around,
or the circles.
Yes, the circles. Yeah, that's right. I'm pretty sure a lot of woodwind players do this. Yeah, the little circle of frustration.
Of frustration.
Like the little Mac wheel, that little rainbow wheel of death on the Mac computer. So that's you get stuck in it. It's a bit frustrating. Yep. So when I see my students stuck in that, we stop, we look at the melodic contour, like if it's just runs going up, I say, okay, I think your body movement might actually be impeding your cognitive ability to understand and then externalize and embody that. Right? I know my student knows how to play crazy chromatic scales, and they've done a lot of work on that. But I think it's just at a point where actually the body it's trying to do something, like good on you body, but you're actually doing something that's not helpful. I think that's informed by the limits of our instrument and the weird ways we have to hold it. And we all know those movements that we get stuck in. I think that's just inherent to the instrument that you play. But then we stop, and I get my student to move in one direction very subtly. They can move in any way they like. In fact, I do encourage them to have a go, okay, let's try just moving backwards as you play that phrase, or just trying moving forward or to the side, or maybe you're just lengthening your spine when you do that. You don't have to move. Some people don't want to have very dynamic movement when they're playing, but we actually have a really rich inner space in our body, and we can just think of lengthening and shortening our spine, or widening and narrowing, or bulging and hollowing. That's been a really lovely thing for me to realize. When I'm on stage, I feel very self-conscious of how much I'm moving, and I know my perception is warped by my adrenaline and my nerves. So I really tap into this idea of I have so much space inside my body. I have this three-dimensional space, and I also can reach out into my external space, which I envisage in this icosahedron. And then for my students, giving them a bodily direction that supports the music instantly. It's always such a fix of, and then you can see the cognitive relax as well, because while they're trying to move around and play that note, moving with the embodied cognition. It works in and out. You need the other. And then it's like, oh, I've got this plan. So I'm not trying to choreograph musicians or anything like, or force them into a way. But I think it's important to recognize when the body steps in and is actually impeding itself and the cognitive aspect. Like if you had to move a lot, like that much, and think about playing, some pretty tricky technical passages, it would be pretty hard. What is it like to have something, a movement that works with the melodic contour, or where that technical passage is going? At least sometimes. So when I see my student or other students as well getting into a bit of a funk, we can look at this embodied way of helping them get there, and it's so quick, it's so immediate. You see the spark in that, oh, whoa, yeah, hang on, maybe I was just putting on all of this extra movement stuff, as you said, Angela, unconsciously as well, because we can get trapped in our head. Yeah, fair enough. Also, flute playing, that where we blow into it, it's so close to our head. Even our fingers are pretty close to our head. We're so like upper body, forward facing. Like, fair enough. I can understand. I experience it as well. That's why it's great to have external people, teachers, peers, colleagues, guiding us to help us just reconfigure where we are in ourselves and our external environment.
Yeah. And I know that we've talked about this too, but again, it sounds self-serving coming from us since this is what we do, right?
Right.
So it's nice to have somebody else saying, no, you need external, like same with what you would do for your musical training. You're not going to just self-teach, and expect to get to beyond a certain level, usually, rare exceptions, but like, yeah, but you can get better faster with outside help. And I'm going to backtrack here just a little bit to what you were talking about with the concept of that smooth directional line, right, with the movement of that passage you were talking about. And it struck me, so I felt like I wanted to share it. But what you're talking about is something that I know we do through, well, at least as musical teachers, there's an aspect of this, and then through the physical portion too. But when you're teaching an early student an instrument, right, and they're starting to get towards that intermediate, right? Well, okay, well, your C major scale. Yes, I know my C major scale. I can play it all day long. Okay, and we get to a passage, and they get hung up on this etude that they're working on. You see it, like, okay, what is it? A C major scale. Why are you reading every note? What do you mean? Do you know your C major? Play your C major scale. There it goes. You don't need to read every note. Oh,
yes,
what you're
they read every note, and they can embody every note as well.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And it's like as if I'm trying to read a sentence, and I'm reading every word because I've forgotten how to read an entire sentence and connect it together. It's the same with that. I mean, well, it's like if I don't have formal dance training, but there was a large dance and choreography aspect of the course, which was actually really wonderful, and learning some of those choreography elements. I had to experience that of like, okay, we want to do this and that and that, and then we're going to spin around, okay, and then we're going to level change down to the floor. So, did it feel like I was learning a musical instrument again from the very beginning? Exactly what you've described, Jen, of we've learned the individual parts, but a huge part of musical phrasing and movement phrasing is how we integrate all of that together. And that's embodied cognition. That's every somatic practice, I feel, is helping people get to that point. And I like to think what part of what my PhD is looking at, and one part that I'm really excited of, is how I'm sort of phrasing it, and what I think is really important when I'm looking at like I video recorded a number of flute players all playing the same piece. sight reading, practicing, and then performing the same piece, and I'm observing their movement over that learning period, but also between their final performances, to look at the development of that movement, and it's really lovely because you hear them. There is that musical phrasing, there is that movement phrasing as well. I always start my movement analyses with no sound, to just look at the movement, because as soon as you hear and see, you're getting influenced by the musical phrasing. So I have to meet that to just get down to the movement analysis. But then as soon as I put them together, there's like this third level phrasing, or this third narrative coming through, what you hear, what you see, and then that performative factor. So that's, in terms of my PhD, what I'm really interested in. And it's what I feel you've just been describing, of this, C major scale, I know it, and to play it, and note, right. And then to let go of that, to have the cognitive and the embodied aspect, and it produces this thing.
Yeah.
Not sure how to describe that.
Just getting out of your own way, you know.
That's it. And that's where I think self-body knowledge and having other people helping and guiding you is so important, and really liberating as well, because you know, not just by chance what's working, but you've really decided, actually I can get into this habit of playing every single note. I know that's one of my habits. So therefore, when I'm in my practice session and that sort of unconsciously starts to happen, that's fine. We don't have to prevent it unconscious, but we have a conscious practice method and technique to help, when, hang on, I'm getting really frustrated. Maybe I can check myself out in the mirror. Oh yeah, look, I'm starting to go into that little wheel of frustration, or circle of frustration. Hang on, that's right, I know what I can do. Let's start looking at how I can connect this. I totally agree with you, Jen. The visual aspect can really draw us back into, we lose our bodies in that way. Absolutely. It's also humans are, I think, generally more strongly visually biased than orally, and I'd say even especially now, modern world, when we've got phones and computer screens, and like TikTok itself has probably contributed to a lot of, this visual culture. The oral, the music aspect of that is huge. But again, we know that music psychology studies which have looked at gender bias, attractiveness bias, race bias of musicians on stage, and the the really thorough research that they've done into that bias. We know visual bias plays a huge part into that. So therefore, it's not surprising that when we're musicking ourselves, that our visual bias can take us away from our body. So we just need those moments where we can have someone to help us, or we can help self-guide ourselves. A great thing that I think more people should do, and including myself, is video record yourself. It's so hard to do. I know. I'm cringing at the thought of having to look back at myself. I think, is that what I look like? But it's this self-knowledge. Because when we perform, or play music or something, we are the only ones never to really know what we look or sound like, because we're the ones doing it. We'll never have that experience of, even with the best recording, we'll never really know. Also, because our inner experience, what we feel, what we think we look like, what we think we feel like when we're playing, is so strong. What is our inner perception? How can we align what we think we're doing with the outer actual happening of that? So that's where recording can be really useful. And this is, spoiler alert, one of the main sort of findings of my PhD, which I wasn't expecting. When I had looked at, I had video recorded a lot of different flute players playing the same piece. And then afterwards, I got them to sit down. They chose their favourite performance that was recorded, and we sat down together to look at their their movement while they were playing, so that they could tell me, oh, I wasn't happy with that, so I had an unconscious shudder or something. It was important for me to not just slap my own external analysis on it, but also to interview that person and understand how they thought they moved. And every single flute player, as soon as they sat down, there was a cringe moment. Like before, that interview officially started, it was, oh gosh. And a high number of them, I can't remember the exact percentage right now, many of them, especially the younger, like the undergraduate and some of the master students, were a bit like, oh, is that what I look like? Oh, I didn't realize that I did that. They said, I thought I was making huge dynamic movements. And then actually on stage, they realized, oh, they barely moved at all. And actually I had the opposite. Someone else said, I don't move at all when I play.
All over the place?
Not all over the place, but they absolutely did. And it was really interesting. Every time there was a long sustained note, that person started swaying in a very particular repeated pattern. So they were so sure they'd actually, it's kind of funny, they said to me, oh, look, no offense, but your PhD study, I don't know how useful it's going to be, because I don't like, people don't move when they play. It's it's not a thing. And I said, oh, okay, well then I guess it'll be just my PhD summed up pretty quick there. Anyway, everyone's anonymous, of course. But anyway, then that person performed for me, and it was, amazing. So, I, of course, you sit down and they had no idea, oh, I move like that. And wasn't huge movement, but it was there. And actually that subtle like swaying, it was actually really sort of beat related.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, oh yeah, I was really on that long note, then I was really just having to wait for the next count. So you think, look, that's fine. I'm not there to judge that. It's just there to observe. And what I'm more interested in is, were you aware of that? Is that what you want to do? If not, how can we change that for you? Are you interested in that? It's about empowering musicians to know themselves and to have assistants doing that, have a language and a way of breaking that down so that they can then choose how they want to move. I totally agree. If that person doesn't want to have huge dynamic movements when they're playing, that's great. But also unconsciously, I think your body wants to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just through the flowing phrases, was able to be quite still, but then on that long note, that body, what I thought might have been a bit of a recuperative pattern. And this is my final comment on recording these flute players. I was really interested in what they did after they finished that last note, and I looked at what body part initiating, sequencing, spatially. Did they need to step back down to the left in sort of this diagonal spatial pull? Did they need to roll out their shoulder? Did they actually need to have a bit of a reset? Because that moment, I think the body is so unconscious. The body movement is so unconscious, but the body knows what it needs. So it's not a huge part of my PhD, and it's more something that I'd like to look into the future. But recuperative patterns, well, what do people just naturally do after they've finished playing that final note, and then it was okay, recording off. When you think that it's over, what does your body naturally do? Where does it go? How does it start, initiate, and how dynamic or does it need mobility? Does it need stability in it? Is it more of a functional on the functional end, or is it expressing neutrality, or do you need quite an expressive way of recuperating afterwards? So I'm really interested in this idea of recuperation and what people need. And I used to think recuperation was just sleeping. So work and sleep and sleep playing and sleeping. And through my movement training, I've really come to realize that actually sometimes my recuperative my body needs to recuperate just by being silly and having a happy dance, or actually being quite dynamic and expressive, or maybe it's rolling on the floor a bit, or feeling a really stable flooring underneath me, because my hypermobility can sometimes get a bit, I feel too mobile, and my body craves stability, not sleep, but stability, and make some specific strength training to help that. Recuperation it's linked to those things, those sayings of like, there's no such thing as the best posture. The best posture is the next posture. And this idea of, it's a, you can sit with one leg up, and I do, do that for 20 minutes, and then I swing around and I do it on the other side, and then I sort of balance it out. And why can't I sit down on the couch, for 20 minutes and do some work, and then I might stand up and I have a sit-stand desk. So, it's just about changing, and the essence of changing movement, and when that needs to happen, and those recuperative patterns, and checking in with your body, being flexible and knowledgeable enough to know what you need, what you can do, how you might get around that, and a language and a structure for supporting it. Otherwise, movement can seem, I think, quite off-putting, especially for musicians. I'm sure we all know, working with music students on that sort of physical and embodied level, sometimes I feel like I have to convince some of my students that moving is good, and it isn't just restricted to moving your fingers on the flute. Do you
Yes.
experience that?
In fact, I have one student I'm thinking of at the moment that I'm teaching, and she gets very much so into doing the same things, and her head juts forward a lot. She does a lot of this, and I'm just like, ow, it hurts me to look at you. Like, we need to move, and I got to break her out of that pattern. I'm like, so sometimes I have her do the opposite. I'm like, okay, I want you to play that. Don't move at all. She's like, well, and it's really hard for her not to. I'm like, okay, now do a different movement. So her favorite way to break out of any pattern she's trying to break out of is to walk and play. Just walk. And it can be side, it can move forward, it can be circles, it can be just wandering. I'm like, this piece. You've played it 7 million times. You've got it memorized, don't you? She goes, I don't think so. I'm like, yeah, you do. Yeah, I'm pretty positive, at least to a point, you have this memorized. She goes, yeah, maybe. And so then she starts walking. Just play it. Just wander around the room and just play it. And she sounds so much better. And all she's doing is walking, because she's free to explore the space around her and not feel like she's stuck in this. I have to like you don't need the music stand. This person does, this particular student doesn't. And the walking, I feel, she's like, that's my favorite. Like, maybe you should learn how to walk on stage and take she tends to memorize everything anyway. Like, maybe you should just take the stand off and walk around and look at your audience. I'm going to talk to her about that this week. I just came up with that. See what she says.
Yeah. Absolutely, because the visual aspect, as Jen was saying, that locks us into looking at this stand. Then we revolve around this stand, and we we become very front facing, like you get trapped in that headspace. So to step back.
Who says we can't walk around? What? Where is it ever said when we were taught to play music that you have to stand here or sit here? Like, why can't we move? Where did that come from?
Exactly.
I don't know.
A couple of my favorite modern clarinet performers. Of course, they've done this a billion times. They're like, I don't need the music. It's fine. What am I playing today? I don't know. We'll find out, They no stand, and they will wander. I mean, not super crazy far. They're always generally in front of the piano, but they're like, okay, play with the pianist a little bit. Come over here, look at this person. What? They're so much fun to listen to.
It's interactive.
And they're. I mean, they're not stressed out. They're like, I feel like being over here right now.
Maybe I don't know where it came from, but I start to think like the church I grew up in, it was a big, like, the preacher stood behind a pulpit. That was it. And the song leader stood behind the pulpit, and that was it. And it was kind of like a whoo thing when they had like mics and they could walk around and like, who aren't you like contemporary or whatever. And then it got to be like not a thing. But it was kind of that in the beginning, it was just different. You know, you were expected to be here. And then someone went, no, I don't. I'm going to move. I'm going to walk over here, talk over, engage with the audience. It's exactly the same thing. You're still engaging with an audience. It's just that audience isn't used to that classically. We see that with performers of all other kinds of genres. Bands don't just stand on stage and sit in one spot. They're all over the place. Why aren't we?
That's so true, Angela. Yes, I think this does come down to perhaps in, especially, I can't speak for any music tradition outside of Western classical music, but definitely I sort of feel this master apprentice, even what I was saying before, this old ideology, although I think it still continues, of you know, the composer's intention needs to be just passed through this vessel of a musician, where you just have to, you know, it's this cognitive understanding of the piece, and yes, we need a person on stage to do that, but you as a musician, you have to be, it's not about you, it's about passing on that composer's intention. So, and I think maybe that's part of how it's gotten. Western classical music is, a lot of it is based around hierarchy. Let's, you know, look at theoretically and you know, melody and harmony, and even we have more important chords than others. It's all hierarchy based, metric hierarchy. Like that's the 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that's just how it works. So maybe it's seeped out into our understanding of of performers, and it could be. Well, that's, you know, definitely been a thing, and this idea of, yeah, how did we get so disconnected to our bodies, and why can't we walk around? I'm all for walking around and playing, by the way. We'll officially state that here. You are allowed to walk and play your instrument.
There's a group. You guys heard of this group called the Fourth Wall?
Yes.
They're a flute. They were at Utah, I think. Maybe.
Yes, they were.
Flute, marimba, and trombone.
Trombone, yes.
I think.
Yeah.
They dance, and they don't just dance while they play.
It's like playing like acrobatic stuff happening there. That's, yeah.
While playing like Messiaen or Peter and the Wolf, or it's the craziest thing. And I don't know how I feel about it. I'm like, if that's your shtick, roll with it. I like it. It's a new thing. You know, it's going to hit some people just right. But at the other point, it's like, what are you doing? Classical sensibilities, you're just supposed to stand there and stare at your stand. Like, no.
Yeah, absolutely, Angela. I understand that sentiment exactly. When I first started looking for music that has composer instructed movement and choreography and stage directions, absolutely. You know, that there are like, well, these are certain pieces where that is intended, composer's intended, but you know, it was written into it conceptually. You know, it's there, rather than someone taking a flute piece and slapping a ballet on top of it, you know, or trying to do a pirouette. And I can understand, I can feel a little bit like that as well when I sort of, but you know, like you as well, Angela, it has artistic merit, but it does cause some feelings inside of me, and that that's been worthy of really looking into myself and critiquing that, or just investigating and being like, oh yeah, why do I feel like that? Where has that thought come from? Is that serving me? Or sort of how can I challenge that? How might I get around that? It's been really interesting. It's definitely, I haven't just made one decision. It's still ongoing. And it is really interesting to consider that and reflect on it. So I totally resonate with what you're saying, and those things that you say, oh yeah, hang on, how do I feel? Well, yeah, I have a strong reaction there. What is that? What does that mean? And yeah, and does that can we be moving into that? Yeah, how much of this movement is there anything wrong if someone says, no, I do want to choreograph the Prolonged Flute Sonata, you know, and then, well, can they?
Why not?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's it's definitely interesting to think. I've had to grapple with a lot myself, even preparing this repertoire that has composer instructed movement. There have been times where I think, oh, okay, I can do this for my PhD, but I don't think that I could really fully do, you know, a whole concert series in public. I don't think people are going to like that.
Not ready
Especially, yeah, they're not ready for it. And, you know, and so I've grappled with that. I even mentioned in my PhD when I was recording that one person who said, oh, your PhD isn't going to find much because people don't move when when they play. They were genuinely concerned for me, which is, you know, I appreciate that. And they also spoke of Marcel Moyse and also the French tradition as well. They really believed that people like Marcel Moyse would not have wanted people to move at all, flute players to move at all when they play. And yes, they had some interesting. I didn't really see sort of evidence of that. I've seen some masterclasses and teaching of Marcel Moyse, but
wasn't he
anyway.
in like the Victorian era?
Right. Yeah, or the early 1900s.
Well, maybe not. Well,
you know, the French flute school.
That was a very, what's the word? Closed off, proper.
That's right. The ideology. Yeah.
You know, the entire culture in that point. You know, you dress a certain way, you behave a certain way. You do not dress and behave a certain way.
You forget that Mozart drank and did cocaine, you know. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm not sure about the Victorian era, but definitely in those early 1900s at the Paris Conservatoire, and thinking about going into the world wars, and actually I think, you know, Europe, what that did to them culturally as well, that, you know, that there was a lot of people closing off from the horrors of war and just recovering from that. I can understand that maybe there was a certain mentality of, after so much horrendous you know, war activity and crimes and happening, people were seeking that stability again. So look, I wouldn't be surprised if it came back to, okay, very structured teaching and performance practice, you know, something solid to hold on to after so much had been turned upside down in those years of the war. And, you know, it didn't just go straight back to, you know, happy families afterwards. You know, there were decades and generations of struggle afterwards. So in terms of, I don't know about this Marcel Moyse. I don't know what his full opinions were on movement and playing, but certainly from what I gather, not that I'm an expert or anything, I've read a few of his letters and seen some of his original masterclasses, but the way even he sort of gestured in his masterclasses and talking of the phrase, okay, maybe he himself, especially in his older years, wasn't jumping around and walking around. You know, physical limitations and abilities come into play there too. But I think he would have definitely encouraged it in terms of a metaphor of, you know, movement of the phrase. You see that in teachers as well, when they you can convey more in teaching with
when you move,
and that quality of your hand movement, rather than saying, okay, so start off with a very soft dynamic, and then you'll need to gradually increase at words. So so hard to convey. Well, it's hard to convey music through words, and this sort of makes me think of music as an art form compared to even sort of poetry. I love poetry, absolutely, but I think music can convey more pieces of simultaneous information: melody, harmony, timbre, articulation, instrumentation, vocal tone, etc. And you can have written word, and that itself has its own structure, and, you know, but I think with that that visual, I don't want to say limitation, but definitely, sort of linguistic limitations perhaps. I think, music can convey, perhaps this is maybe a working hypothesis here, can convey so much more, and movement being like that as well. It's why it's so hard to capture movement. But it's the same with music notation. Music notation is captures very little of that actual sound that comes out, and it's, yeah, if you had to notate, well, people transcribe jazz solos all the time, but that's just notes and rhythms, and we know that, yeah, that's right.
If you haven't heard the original solo, I don't care how good the transcription is, it's not going to be the same. Like,
no,
yeah, absolutely, yeah, that's right. And it's we encounter those same things in movement and dance as well. So look, it can make movement analysis quite tricky, and I don't like writing a thesis with words about movement is hard. People joke all the time, and I think there's this sort of, the 3-minute thesis competition for like PhD and master's writers. Well, there's this sort of joke equivalent of it, of like the interpretive dance your PhD, and people, it's a real thing, but it's science majors get in there. But I think that is actually a part of my thesis I really need to do. and I really need to have this. It's it has to be visual and audio, and it is absolutely, there's a lot of notation, but it's the video, the people doing the thing, we need to capture that. And I just feel, people joke to me all the time, oh, do an interpretive dance. Yes, I will. That would actually really help me. And music teachers do that all the time. They're experts at, convey, but it comes so naturally. And this is, I think, important as well. You don't need to be a hardcore movement analyst. Everyone's body has its own knowledge. I think people can really tap into what they need. Maybe they need someone to help them with that language and to understand certain patterns and connections. But if you have a body, no matter what it can or can't do, it still can do things, and it has its own knowledge. Our bodies tell our autobiography in a way. They carry injuries or cool things that they can do. They carry emotions and our history and our memories. And that itself is really important. So people already have a rich inner movement world, and people like Angela, Jen, and myself, we're here to help you on a different, like, heaps of different ways of going about it, but we can help people on that path to their own self-knowledge, which feeds back into themselves. So yeah, people are their own people. Everyone is a movement expert. We all learn how to navigate ourselves through the world, and people have good instincts. If you don't think, oh, I don't really get along with that person, oh, there's something, I feel a bit. We all do deal with like group synchrony, all those people that you really vibe with, your tribe or your best, what. Oh, it's and you just feel like you can breathe together. Your rhythm in your sentences finish. You can finish each other. So you have that lovely flow. That is musical. That is that sort of movement art in a way. So it's just a really sort of human experience, I think. And this is why it's so lovely. We can have that expressivity in it, and it doesn't just have to be functional. Yes, we do want to talk about the injuries, that's so important, and the functional recuperative body conditioning strength training, but it also has this really beautiful expressive part to it as well, which musicians can put back into their creativity as well. So when they're doing their body conditioning, they might think, oh yeah, this is I feel like I'm really at the gym right now, but hold on to that because I think that is strengthening and training those muscles to perform in that expressive way as well. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm really, really passionate about this. It's not just functional or expressive, but they feed into each other. To be expressive, we need to have a healthy, efficient, strong, mobile, stable way of moving. So looking after yourself in that way is going to feed back into your creative output and just your general happiness as a person as well, to feel enlivened through music and breath and all that sort of thing. So it's really important, and I absolutely respect the work that you both do in those areas.
Thank you, Simone. I think you're really right with all of that. I think we could go on and on and on. I mean, about how they're all connected. And as we're talking, I'm thinking, wow, this sounds like Alexander. Wow, this sounds like Feldenkrais. Wow, this sounds like the movement assessments I do. Wow, this sounds like things I talk about in the gym. Wow, this sounds like things that Jen has talked about a million times. Like this all, I mean, it's so interconnected, which is, why I really wanted to have you on here. And I'm kind of really curious about what this notation looks like. But for anybody who wants to, who's curious about some resources, are there any resources that you would recommend for people who are interested in learning more about this? What would you tell them?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of official sort of books and sources. If anyone looks up even the Laban Bartenieff Institute of Movement Studies, I can send and provide links to what we chat in. I'll make sure that we can get all of that. Either the Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance in the UK, they've also got shops. There's a lot of there are lots of resources available, books and things like that people can buy or get onto a mailing list. If you go onto the Laban Bartenieff Institute movement, so they've got a really great mailing list of just seeing workshops and conferences and things like that. And I myself am in the process of coming up with just general resources. I have informal ones that I send to people, and I'm in the process of creating some that look a bit more interesting, but ones that could be, they're just basic introductory things, but that like you said, Angela, that would show this, because the notation system is super cool. The body symbols really look like little body symbols. It's pretty adorable in my opinion. And the space symbols are kind of cool, and if you'll see, for musicians will see the connection to music notation. So I've definitely noticed from my teaching and my research that some basic introductory level resources just freely available are needed to help explore the system more. So I'll very happy to put links to things and to be providing some other resources as well. It's a really sort of growing field, which is exciting. So yes, absolutely, I can help put out. I think these institutions are a great place to start, because they do talk about brief history of who these people were and a bit about the system, and then if you really want to get into it, there are some interesting books that really dive into it, and they're beautiful books as well, if I can say. There's a lot of them, especially with the dance notation or the Laban notation, and some beautiful caricatures of people moving and the space harmony and geometry around them. I love them. So there are some really gorgeous books, but I'm also working on getting resources that are introductory but also freely available, so that people can access this, because personally I'd love people to really take it on board and to make it accessible in that way.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes. So
that'd be great. Yeah.
Jen, did you have any other questions or thoughts?
Forgot I had muted myself because the cats were running around. No, I mean, I think this has been a great topic, a great discussion, a great different angle on the same thing. We keep bringing up here in a lot of ways. Yeah, that's all I got.
Beautiful. Well, Simone, thank you again for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure. We're really glad you made the time to, figure out the time zone thing, because you're all the way in Australia and we're in 3 different time zones here. But if anybody has any questions or wants to reach you, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put a link. But otherwise, my website, SimoneMaurermusic.com, is the best way to reach out to me. I do have some social media as well. Instagram is probably the place for me that that I'm active. But yeah, social media or on my website. If you want to email through anything, and absolutely, I'm very open to that. I've had wonderful people around the world contact me. That NFA convention was a really great place to get started, and probably one of my most interesting connections has been someone from India who works with puppets and sort of machines, and looking at LMA and this and puppetry, or motion. It's really fascinating. I can't summarize it particularly well right now or very concisely, but looking at puppetry and sort of machines, and how this Laban movement analysis can be incorporated into that as part of that sort of artistic endeavor, and also reflecting on it as well. And I didn't know, but the history of Indian dance has a huge parallels to a lot of this. Not surprising, it's also a somatic practice, and there are some very old but just amazing texts where they've thought about all of these things, again in another sort of linguistic and cultural way. So it's just fascinating. That's one thing that I haven't really explored myself, is looking at this outside of a very sort of Eurocentric culture. But that's just because of sort of my limitations of English speaking and my location. But I do acknowledge it and really look forward to, as I go through my own career, of understanding and exploring cross-cultural connections, and really just looking at other cultures. India already has good connections to the Laban community. So I find what they do very fascinating. I need to study forever so that I can have time to just explore and learn myself.
Fascinating. Well, thank you again for joining us. We really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
All right. And you guys, thank you. I mean, not you guys, everybody here was, I forget. Never mind.
Thank you for listening. If you are listening at home, we appreciate your time.
Yes. And please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. It will help us to get in front of more musicians. And that is the entire reason we're doing this. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Hey musicians, did you know that up to 90% of musicians will experience playing related pain or injury over the course of their career? How many hushed conversations have you heard about a lingering, quote, shoulder pain, or a weird tingling in your fingers, or maybe low back pain, or a crampy weakness, or maybe you or your colleague just says, I just have to get through the gig, and you watch them pop Advil like candy, maybe flush it down with whiskey. How many times have we seen something like this? So many, right? Well, it's time we start talking about our struggles, our pain, our frustrations in a private space where we don't just complain and mobilize and blindly stretch, but we learn how to strengthen our muscles, our career successes, and build each other up. I've got a brand new program that combines all of these things, and I want you to be a part of it. It's a community, not a workout. It's a community with group coaching and great content that in 12 weeks will have you understanding more about your body, what you need, and how you work so you can avoid that career-threatening injury. The 3 things that musicians don't want. We don't want to be injured. We don't want to have a lack of stamina. And we don't want to be clueless. AKA, when you hurt, who do you go see? Just a, quote, doctor? Well, this program addresses all of those things. You're going to walk away with an immense knowledge of who to see. You're going to be empowered because you're going to know what to do should you ever get injured, or should you have a colleague that gets injured. You will be able to actually offer appropriate advice. You're also going to learn about the body and the anatomy as it relates to playing your instrument and your own anatomy. And then you're going to learn how to build not just your strength and endurance, but you're going to learn how to design your own corrective exercise program. So I hope you will join me in this new program. It's called the Music Strong Pilot Program, Job Security for Musicians.